is Johanna, and we have to say it in a pair because, with this one you do. So her favorite word, F-A-V-O-O-U-R-I-T-E, her favorite word is and her least favorite word is but. So welcome her, please. Thank you. Did I write but? My favorite word, yeah. And I didn't notice that. So I'm going to share two things with you tonight, and one is a poem that I wrote, and one is a poem that I wanted to write but didn't. And I'm going to share that one with you first. I've titled this "Apology for a Poem Not Written." The reason why I wanted, or I'm going to start with that, is I'll just read what I wrote. I want to share this poem that I haven't written with you because I think that the process of my having not written it, or rather of having from a single word or image an idea grow to contain more and more, finally so much that it is not even a poem anymore, is basic to the poetic process, at least mine, and to language itself. When I first heard the word retable and knew that I would be responding to the word for the dictionary project, my first impulse was to think about the word itself, then to think about how my initial associations with it corresponded to its definition. My most immediate and obvious association was the word table, so I thought about that. Then I thought about the prefix re, which is also, of course, attached to familiar words like rethink and redo. I thought about how a table might be rethought, repeated in some way, and it occurred to me that the word table was in fact already a sort of retabling, that this was the condition of the word itself, which is, of course, intended to stand in as a symbol for something else, the real thing. This put me in mind of Plato and his allegory of the cave and the part in chapter 10, which I had only the vaguest memory of, where Socrates says, "I think we have usually assumed a general form of idea, one idea in each class of many particulars to which we give the same name. You understand, don't you?" Glaucon replies, "I do." "Now," says Socrates, "take any class of many particulars you please. For instance, if you like, there are many beds and tables." "By all means." It's Glaucon. "These have ideas, I suppose, underlying them. Two, in fact. One of the bed, one of the table." I started to think about the way that language is, in the way that Plato describes here, very much like the dictionary definition of the word retable, an altar. The word rests upon the idea, the whole structure assembled very much for the purposes of, and as an act of, faith. Faith that the words we use will cohere with meaning, or, as Plato says in Book 10, the same book in which he cast the poets out of his republic, will hold fast to truth. Shortly after I started thinking about the word retable in this way, I took a trip to Las Vegas. Driving into the city, I started thinking more broadly about image, about how impossible it is to separate language from image, image from spectacle. I thought about, checking into the Flamingo Hotel, how we worship the image. Nowhere, perhaps, is this more clear than on the Strip in Las Vegas. The only thing comparable, perhaps, is, if you were looking for proof of this, would be the Uffizi Gallery, I think, or the Louvre. So my idea for the poem I wanted to write for the dictionary project grew now, from its starting point with Book 10 in the Republic, my modest ambition for tackling the concept of language as split from and contingent on its idea form, to encompass the entire city and idea of Las Vegas. Our infatuation with the image and the way that the image, worshipped as such, image that is, as and for the sake of image, turns quickly into what Baudrillard refers to as a simulacrum. Then I visited the Nuclear Testing Museum and started to see how all of the ideas I had so far come up with for my poem had to do, as everything has to do, perhaps eventually, with the bomb. Here was the pure spectacle, a dramatic split, literalized in the material itself, between the actual and potential power of form. The refrain of the museum descriptions and testimonies of scientists, tourists, activists, and technicians involved in the testing site since the 1930s seemed to be, "We don't ever want to use this power that we have, but it is important that our enemies know that we can use it, and we will if we need to." This seems to reflect the fundamental split that Plato recognizes at the heart of language between pure abstract idea and pure concrete form. I started thinking about how Socrates, according to Plato, wanted, or rather thought it most expedient, to banish the poets from his republic because of the way that they do not accept things or speak to things in their pure forms, and in keeping with this reflect the worst, most conflicted parts of human nature. I thought about how the nuclear testing project is really a poetic project in the sense that Plato condemns. It is an experiment not with what is, but what exists beyond form, that which cannot be measured and can be brought about at all only through its interaction with the human imagination. Also, like Plato's poets, the practice of nuclear testing, I thought, also reflects the most conflicted, fearful, and non-rational parts of human nature. Then later on that day, I learned about the artist Jean Tinguely's art project Study for the End of the World. In 1962, at the height of the testing in the Nevada site, Tinguely fashioned an explosive art project made of junkyard rubble and homemade bombs, took it out to the desert outside Las Vegas, and watched it blow. There's a fabulous TV documentary that chronicles the event, accompanying the footage with ironic commentary like, of course, the police were on hand to make sure that the world blows up in an orderly way. By now, my poem was going to be really big. It was going to include Plato's Republic, the city of Las Vegas, with all of the beautiful grand suggestions it makes about image and simulacrum, the Nevada test site with its apocalyptic suggestions and the inherent possibility of reading the apocalyptic image as revelation. I had not completely forgotten about the word's meaning. And now it was going to include Jean Tinguely's artistic imitation of the end of the world, with all of its suggestions and questions regarding artistic/scientific authority and control, too. Then, shortly afterward, I found another piece of information which I thought could act as the final or further piece to the puzzle. In the late 1800s, I learned when commercial photography was still in its infancy, a fun carnival pastime was to gaze into kinetoscopes, which were like private viewing boxes. You could peer in and an image would take shape before your eyes. Apparently, there was general unease about these devices at the time. They were considered to have adverse effects on health. They caused dizzy spells and other viewer contagions. The language that was used to describe the risk these images posed, or rather the process of seeing these images, reminded me instantly of the sort of language that I had just seen represented at the Nuclear Testing Museum from the early days of nuclear experiments. Before, that is, there was any genuine concern and medical proof as to the damaging effects of fallout. Back when people still traveled to Las Vegas to witness the explosions, watched them on hotel roofs, ordered atomic cocktails, and exclaimed with delight over the pink stardust that turned their skin pink after the explosions, and voted for their favorite Miss Atomic Bomb, dressed only in a mushroom cloud in the atomic bomb beauty pageant. The connection between the concern over the potential damage that a kinetoscope could do and the potential damage that a nuclear bomb could do was not interesting to me, or was interesting to me not because it made me doubt the legitimacy of the public's present fears about nuclear radiation, or feel that, as the Nuclear Testing Museum would have like us all to believe, that it is all relative, but because I saw that, once again, it came back to this question, fear, and veneration for the image. Is the world that we see really what appears to us? We seem continuously to be asking ourselves, what happens when it proves not to be? What are our own powers and responsibilities over the images that we subject ourselves to and the images that we create? So that's the poem I didn't write. And I might still, never know. But this is a poem that I did, and I wrote it. It's 1 day old, so you might be able to tell that. And you'll see it's also inspired by, I went back to the beginning, so, book 10. At last, the poet returns to the city. At last, the poet returns to the city. She stands alone in the agora. Is that how you pronounce that?
Like that.
Yeah. Nobody recognizes her. Nobody knows that she has returned. She watches the people pass by, bringing their goods to the marketplace. Everything is as it appears. Now an old blind man walks by. He recognizes the poet. Ah, he says, so you have returned. Now you must see. It was for your own good that we sent you away. Now everything is as it appears. You need not now speak in riddles or tongues. The people gather round. They build a table for the poet, and they sit the poet at the table. Now the poet will defend herself, the old man says. He raises his right hand. Do you swear, the blind man asked, to fasten each word that you speak to what is solid and true? Do you swear that though man is rarely of one mind and is therefore often at war with himself, you will lead him toward reason and law, away from conflict, grief, and suffering? Everyone turns and looks at the poet. The poet opens her mouth to reply, but no sound comes. There is nothing but light. Even the blind man sees that there is nothing to see, that there is no difference suddenly between darkness and light. Confused, the people cry out, "What is the meaning of this?" But their words break on their tongues. They gather like stones at their feet. Someone picks up a stone. He slams his fist on the table that the people have built. He throws his stone at the poet. The people cheer and shout, and every cheer and shout turns to stone at their feet. They pick up these stones. They beat the table with their fists and throw their stones at the poet. The table shatters. The poet flees. The people sit in the ruined agora. They pick up the pieces of the table they built. I thought this was a table, they say. But how can it be a table if it shatters at a single blow? How can it be a table if it is only a part? They rebuild the table and return to the marketplace. Everything is, once again, as it appears. Nothing worth more or less. No one doubts the value of what they have brought or what they have taken away. Sometimes, though, after all of the trading is done, they sit at the table they built and tell stories about how once the poet returned to the city, about how everything was strange and unreal for a time, how they doubted many things. But now they say, this is no longer so. Everything is solid and true. There are only ideas underlying them. Thank you.